Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Live Inspired podcast with John O'Leary. This is John, and I'm so delighted to have you with us on the Live Inspired movement. On every podcast, we try to bring you amazing individuals to share their story, their ups, their downs, what they learned, and ultimately what it means for you. I've had the honor of interviewing guests from all around the world, experts in theater, in the arts, in music, in entertainment, creativity. Frequently, those guests will travel to me. Occasionally, we will do a phone interview, but never, I'm going to say that again, never have I hopped on a flight implicitly and explicitly and only for the purpose of interviewing to the guest. And that is actually absolutely what we are doing today. Late last night, I hopped on a flight for San Diego, went to bed in a hotel, woke up early, prepared again, and I am so excited to be alive, seated across from my friend, a guy that I have looked up to. He's an entrepreneur, he is an artist, he's a speaker, he's a writer, he's a husband, he's a father, he's a sojourner, he's a creative, he's a phenomenal guy. His name is Erik Wahl. And I think as you listen to this interview, you are going to realize why O'Leary hopped on the flight, why he is so fired up, and why you should be too. So here's my invitation to you right now. Buckle up. Get ready for the ride. Open up. I normally tell you to open up your journals. Today, I'm telling you to grab a canvas. Grab a big, huge, empty, blank canvas. Grab your oils or your crayons and get ready to celebrate the gift, the roller coaster ride that is your life. My friends, I ask you right now to sit down and get ready to welcome our newest friend, Erik Wahl. Erik, welcome to Live Inspired with John O'Leary.
John, thank you very much. I'm flattered that you're here. You flew to San Diego. I travel for a living, so the fact that I slept in my own bed last night, was in my own home, and drove 7 minutes to the studio here is a real treat for me. So I really am honored and excited to kind of dialogue with you and amplify some ideas to your listeners. So I'm honored. Thank you.
Well, brother, you have raised millions of dollars for charities. You've been paid many, many millions of dollars by corporate clients. And yet your story does not begin on the main stage. It doesn't begin in front of associations or tens of thousands screaming to your artwork. It starts, like most of our stories, in a more humble setting. So I'm going to take our listeners who are familiar with your work, and those who've never heard the name Erik Wahl, I'm going to take them all back to the same starting point, your childhood. Where did you grow up? What was life like for you as a child?
Sure. I grew up in the Northwest. Father was a pediatrician with his own practice. Mother was a stay-at-home mother. I was raised in a very conservative household that respected and honored hard work and discipline and structure. And I went to school and played athletics to the best of my ability so that I could get good grades, so that I could get into a good school, that I could get a good job, so that I could make lots of money and be happy. And so I followed that formula to a T, and actually got pretty good at it, because that was, what we migrate towards, that which we're affirmed for. And I was affirmed for performing well on the ball field. I was rewarded for getting good grades in school, getting 20 out of 20 on my spelling test. And so that's really the direction that I migrated. That which could be measured,
yes.
I was valued for. And so I kept moving that direction. And it was good until it wasn't good. And what I mean by that is, this was up until I was 30. After graduating from university, became a partner in a firm, and they brokered entertainment. So I was traveling, I was working with other partners that were not traveling, and running a business, and hiring, and training, and doing filing, and contracts. So it was a very business-centric, analytical kind of, and some relationships driven, because I was also doing some sales.
You talked about it being good, and then you finished that with until it was not good. I don't want to talk about the not good quite yet.
Okay.
What did you like about your work when you were in corporate America and checking the right boxes?
That I was moving forward, that my 401k was giving me additional security. Because we start with nothing, and then we try and start building security around us. So then we start, if we have children, we start socking some away for their education. We maybe move towards buying our first home, and then maybe trying to upgrade to a bigger home. So much of it is centered around security, and then moving up that ladder. How in my position am I moving forward in my work? And all of those metrics added up. I started to make more money. I started to kind of move up that hierarchy, buy that first house, start socking away money for ourselves, for our kids. And so it felt like all those metrics were moving in the right direction, that I would call myself successful. So it was good. I was doing well under this system of achievement and meritocracy. I was moving at a very linear rate forward, and it was good.
Your identity back then, what was it attached to?
That's actually a good question, because as I reflect back now, if we were having a conversation, I would have told you that my family is the most important thing to me. But I think if you looked at my life and maybe my checkbook, you might see something different, where I at cocktail parties I would be, oh, my family's the most important thing to me, but I also valued hard work to the nth degree. So I was first in, last out. I would work 6 or 7 days a week if I needed to, and I would, miss functions, family functions, that which I said was most important to me, to continue pressing forward for that which maybe I said wasn't as important for me. So I was just very success driven, very purpose driven, with achievement, or even dare I say money, being kind of that measuring of what achievement was. As a 20-year-old, that was kind of how I viewed it. That's where I was measured. So
do you think what you were pursuing and measuring and being measured by back then is what most of us feel like we are pursuing and being measured and measuring today?
That's the kind of Socratic question. That is a question back to ourselves, and that's it. No one can answer that for you. You have to answer that for yourself.
But as you've traveled around now, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
As you've traveled around, and as you've met tens of thousands and been in front of tens of millions of individuals, literally, are you sensing that many of us are, in some regards, Erik, living someone else's life?
Yes, and so that is kind of a quote, don't let others dictate your future, be yourself. Who were you before the world told you what you should be, kind of identity. And I believe in that, but I also believe that that we still have great actualization lying dormant inside of us. And do I see that around the world? Yes, I see that. Tens of millions. I don't know if I could call that a number. I'm kind of just doing what I feel I'm most excited about, and where I see the greatest need, the greatest void right now. More so than anything else, in all of business, in all the world, is a need to move towards empathy and unity and love, and away from the 3 deadly P's, power, prestige, and possession. But all of our systems, our education system and our corporate system, our American patriotic system, is set up to reward power, prestige, and possessions. And so that's why it's difficult for us to understand what is our truest version of ourselves, because the script we've been given for how to live is maybe just slightly off. And so I want to be a reflection of, or an ambassador for, a more connected, loving, empathetic, human experience. And then if good work, if good grades, if good athletic performance, good relationships, good financial well-being come as a byproduct of that, that's better. But that's where I've kind of shifted my focus in how I perform. I translate different. People don't know that's what they're getting. I'm not a faith, hope, love speaker. I'm a corporate speaker, but I'm connecting to them a little bit differently than they thought they were going to be connected with. So there's immediate, during my presentations, there is an aha moment. There's a wow that this wasn't what I thought it was going to be. a graffiti artist or even an artist or a business speaker on creativity or leadership is we're bypassing the head, we're bypassing the brain, the cynic, and we're going straight to the heart. We're dropping down, and I'm getting to this element of maybe, like we talked about, who they were before the world told them what they should be. Once I give them that peak, all of a sudden their mind becomes stretched, and they see everything around them just a little bit differently, even only for those 60 minutes during the presentation. But a mind once stretched never returns to its original dimensions. And so that's, I'm just stretching a mind, just temporarily expanding consciousness so that they can look at all of these elements of their life a little bit differently. And that's what I truly am excited about.
You know, and sometimes someone can gently help you stretch your mind. And other times your mind is profoundly stretched for you. You mentioned that it was good until it wasn't. So I want to talk about that pivot. Your life, your business, your finances, your prestige, your power, your possessions, your life. You're married, you got 3 babies. Life is good. And then something shifts.
Yeah.
Take us back to that shift.
And so that was my identity, or my ego was kind of insulated by these buffers of financial security, of that I was performing well on my own value scale of meritocracy, building. My net worth felt affirming to me, and that's when the dot-com bubble wiped me out, and it hit me, it blindsided me because I'd done everything really conservatively and positioned myself really conservatively financially. I built this fortress of security around me, but also I graduated at a really rough time because this was 1993, because if you remember 93 to 99, everything you touched turned to gold. It was this, I was going to retire at age 35. You know, when I was 24, the way I was positioning, making money, positioning stocks in this technology boom, is I kind of had it penciled out that I'm going to work really hard, invest very wisely, and then retire about age 35, and then I'll be able to coach all my kids' soccer games and travel with my wife. And so that was kind of my game plan, is I was going to accelerate this curve through enhanced living, working harder than those around me to achieve my goals earlier so that I could then live a fulfilled life of exploration and wonder, earlier than most.
And then the explosion comes. And then life changes. And then how do you respond to this?
Not well. And that's where, I don't, from stage, I don't talk about that it was not a triumphant, no.
Right. Rocky climbing the steps with both arms up.
I'm letting go of this previous life, and now I'm an artist. What it was really a gut-wrenching loss of identity, because I had, as I lost all of my security, all of my stuff, all of my financial well-being, I also watched my identity go. And in my head, I'd worked 30 years to accumulate and it was gone in a blink. And it wrecked me. And so I really didn't know how to deal with this. And I think there's a lot of unhealthy channels I could have turned to numb this pain, this loss of identity. And we all know people in our lives who have numbed pain in less productive ways. I happen to have turned to art and spoke with artists and were just mesmerized by their view of life, which was totally different than mine. Their understanding and connection to the subtle beauty around us, the space between the notes, the quiet, soft times that take place in the morning or in the evening, that happen in relationships. They were amplifying these soft things that I had put on the back burner while I went and worked hard achieving. And so as I watched them take a breath and take in what was around them, that just was a beautiful way to live. And so first I loved spending time around them. Then I took a crack at starting to to paint or create alongside them, because I realized that it didn't need to be driven by a master's degree in fine arts from the best art schools in the country. It was about creating for the sake of creating, and that art was not about creating a finished product, but the act of art was about creating thinking. And so that was a seismic shift for me, where I realized that art is as accessible, creativity is as accessible as I allow it to be. And it really, from that moments, that period of time, that transition in between, that I just poured myself into and felt life-giving affirmation and fulfillment back from this idea of living in the moment, living for this day. And that was one important thing, is I changed my definition of success from being financial fulfillment or security into, what if a successful day was having a good meal with my wife and boys at the end of the day? I can do that. I don't need a job to be able to do that. I don't need certain elements of my life to be a certain way for me to complete the day as being a success, with having good communion and fellowship with my family at the end of the day. So that transition, I guess maybe from scarcity to abundance, is, prior to that I'd lived a life of scarcity, that I needed to secure what was mine, near and dear to me, so that I could build up, because there's less available out there, into switching that equation to a life of abundance, where it wasn't about accumulating more for me. It was just expanding, loving, serving, creating.
That's a wild pivot. I'm even curious why a guy with 3 little ones, a bride who's looking at you wondering how the gas bill is going to be paid this month, would pivot in the first place to art. Were you attracted to art your whole life? Were you an artist growing up?
No, not at all. I think I appreciated music and the art. I knew there was something, but you can't make any money as an artist. It's not a practical living. The road for those have to be, extraordinarily talented and have started at age 6 to be able to capitalize. And so I'd missed that boat. So I didn't see myself as pursuing the arts in any sort of way. It was an ethereal concept, a whimsical concept, a concept to do in your free time after the real work is done. And so no, I wasn't, I did not pursue arts in any way, really. The periodic, I did some theater.
What was the moment, Eric, when it went from being a relaxation tool, an exercise, a way to get out of yourself, and to create something just for beauty's sake? That alone is enough. Into the realization, you know what? I think what I'm doing here might have application beyond here.
It happened as artists have chinks in their armor also. That they do live from an expanded perspective, but they also lack some of the discipline and structure and accountability that it takes to be able to amplify their gift or give momentum to their genius. And so these artists would oftentimes become depressed. They would become self-absorbed because they felt like the world didn't get them. They felt like the world, all I need to do is create, and then the world will all come to me because they'll realize my brilliance. And that's just not the way that works. Is you need to create, and then you need to be disciplined in how you create, why you create, what you create, and then you also need to create structure and amplify that to scale. You need to understand marketing, sales, consumer behavior, pop culture, attention, and that's where artists get lower grades, because they're not typically on time, on budget, within a program. That the people who hold the purse strings, the people who can offer money for art or for these artists to gain traction, they haven't seduced them properly. They're just expecting the relationship to be there. And so I watched that artists need to have a little better understanding of that business life that I'd understood before, and those business professionals needed to have a better understanding of how artists think. And so that's where the lights kind of went on to me, as I thought, it's not either or, it's yes and. And that was the beginning of this journey. Is I created this bridge between this cool art-driven world and this analytical, disciplined business world. And that's really where the presentation came together, was under that realization that I didn't want to just hold that information in my own studios. I wanted to share that. I wanted to share that discovery with others. And then how can I do that in the coolest way? And so that's when I continued studying art as a performance. Like, how can I not just speak this into a PowerPoint presentation, or, at that time behind podiums? It was, how can I bring this alive? How can I activate what I have experienced and let the audience feel it in their heart, and not just simply in their head, not have three actual take-home items to go and become more creative, but to give them the experience that makes them want to change themselves, not have me affect them or change them. This was an internal decision on their part.
Did you consider yourself a presenter or a speaker before this?
No, not at all.
Do you remember your first presentation?
I do, very well.
Come on, man, bring it on.
It was Los Angeles for a company called Michael's, not the art store company that we know now.
That would have been a good fit.
But I called my wife, and on the phone when I was up at the hotel right before the evening, I was getting paid, and they covered my mileage and the hotel, and it was so, it was just a big moment for me. And I called her to say, don't ever let me forget this moment where someone else has their company has paid me money to come and do a presentation to talk to their people, and I was just on cloud nine the night before, excited to share the next morning. And I remember it. I remember I actually remember the presentation as well, but I remember the precursor and all those feelings before, because I locked it in when I made that call, and I said, please don't ever let me forget this feeling of excitement and gratitude that I have the night before my very first presentation ever, my very first paid presentation ever.
You painted in front of them as well as spoke in front of them?
I didn't.
You did not paint back then?
No, not yet. I just spoke because that hadn't been invented yet. But as my friends who then eventually came to see me speak, were from the artist community, they're like, why don't you, you're talking about, why don't you perform some of these paintings or do some of these paintings? And I guess they didn't say it exactly like that, but they said, why, you need to make this more of a feeling and less of an analytical presentation. And so that's where I started thinking about, how can I create a painting in a very short period of time, make it intoxicating. And there was also a gentleman who came to my university and college named Denny Dent, and some of your listeners might know him. He passed away almost 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, but he had performed these live speed paintings of Hendrix or Lennon or Mick Jagger, and he would perform them without saying a word, play the music, and get standing ovations, and never said a word. And I thought there's something sticky about that concept. What if I could master speed painting? So it was less about photorealistic paintings. It was more, how can I wow an audience in 3 minutes and 13 seconds?
The folks who don't know you, Erik, don't realize that part of your claim to fame is not only your art and the beauty of it and the way you present it and share it, but the fact that you walk on stage and at some point, and maybe several times while you are on stage, you speed paint and you take a blank canvas and you make it gorgeous. Like, it's shock. It blows me away every time I see it. So you're saying the genesis of this was the realization, gosh, I guess I could not only talk about creativity and innovation, I could kind of show them this in action, and I've got to do it quickly, so I'll figure it out.
Yeah, and it was that I would go, and the thing that fascinated me most about performance was live music experiences, live theater. It was the people who just couldn't wait for the next song, that cheered, that were felt an emotional connection, an authentic connection to what was going on stage. And then I looked at the kind of lecture circuit or keynote speaking industry, and it was driven by an opening thesis, given, here's the challenge, here's the opportunity, here's the 3 main points that support this argument, and then a nice tidy conclusion on the back end. And I wanted to change that experience from being open, 3 tidy points, and a good close into being a musical experience that would maybe go verse, chorus, verse, bridge, grand finale, finish. And so it wasn't something that could be critiqued in a format, or this I would hand someone in an outline form. It would be like a theatrical experience that you could ask 1,000 people in the audience, what was the main point of that presentation? And you would get 1,000 different answers. That was more exciting to me than everyone walking out with one take-home idea on how to be a better leader, how to be more creative, how to adapt to change. If I could change the molecules in the room for 45 minutes, then they have their own takeaways, and they take away something maybe to do better with their spouse, maybe that they want to do with their kids, maybe at work as a leader in their community. That was more exciting to me than 3 main points.
Yeah, me too. And I try to provide points and the theater when I speak. I think it's important that you change the molecules in the room, right? I mean, we generally know what we need to do next. It's having the audacity and the wisdom and the insight to actually take action on it. Mm-hmm. So I think that's part of what you provide. When you paint, the very first one you did, I'm assuming you walked on stage. There were some butterflies floating around in the stomach that day.
Yes, I'm sure there was, and that was just over time. And I don't know when those butterflies went away or if they go away. They're still. I just channel them differently. And I was telling you earlier, I grew up with an athletic background, and so I almost would treat speaking engagements like an athletic event. That's how I would prepare. That's how I would research and develop and train for a specific event coming up. And then as we get closer, 12 hours, 6 hours, 1 hour, 7 minutes, 1 minute, I would treat it as if I was about to take the field, or in my case, I was also a wrestler. I was about to go mano-a-mano in a very challenging situation. But I loved that. I welcomed that. I wanted that. And I was, I guess also a hit the ball to me coach kind of guy. Is I sort of saw myself then as wanting to champion this message more so than I wanted to champion my brand or my identity. And I think that was also helpful in that I didn't want to be a speaker or an artist. I wanted to be a translator of a message that I thought was really powerful.
What is that? What was and what is that message that you want to translate, that you want to bring to life?
That everyone, and we need to define creativity, but that everyone is creative, but that it actually takes incredible mental toughness and discipline by which to be able to activate it, because it's hidden in our uncertainties of life and the quietness of life, those things which we haven't allowed to enter in or that we haven't valued appropriately. We again value meritocracy, we value achievement, we value success, we value the 3 Ps. I value the 3 Ps, and so this was just a different perspective on what I viewed, and kind of saw myself as maybe an undercover ambassador for the kingdom of love, that I could use this space, this platform that had been given, this keynote speaking space, that I saw a gaping void of authenticity and kind of humanity hadn't been covered at this corporate level. And so I went in and I had all my good, corporate material, because I knew how to write the language for what corporate wanted, to pull the trigger and say, yeah, we want him. I had my slick marketing material and demo reel. But it was then when I took the stage, I always surprised everyone, including the meeting planner, including the vice president that brought me in, and fortunately, delightfully surprised them to the upside. Not this isn't what we ordered, but it's just a matter of changing the language from a spiritual, holistic tone into words and traction that we can sink our teeth into, like adapting to change, like overcoming adversity. When we hear those words, we go, oh, yes. when we start talking about expanded consciousness, meditation, spirituality, love, we kind of like lose it. Whoa, that's for Sunday morning. Hang on, partner. So how could I get into that space using their language? And so that was an art form for me, more so than the paintings I did. Was how can I connect to other people's hearts, minds, and souls through the art of language and music and video. So that was kind of my MO from early on, is that we're all creative. We just need to be very disciplined in how we approach. Just like, and so I say creativity is a discipline. It's a lens by which to see the world that we can either choose to have on, or we can choose to have off. And most of us choose to have it off because it's I can't draw. I'm not an accomplished dancer or musician, or I don't understand when I go to the Modern Art Museum, it just doesn't make sense to me. The lyrics in that song are, I don't know that I agree with all of those systematically in my understanding of how I've been raised. And so we judge art more than we create art. We're more critics than creators. And so my invitation is that all of this critique can become a creator. And then it opens up an entirely new, exciting world to us. Just like, so creativity is a discipline, putting on that, just like gratitude is a discipline.
That's right.
It is a choice. Joy is a discipline. It's a choice, not what happens to us from the outside, but how we choose to drive ourselves from the inside. And so that's really how I view creativity, and that's how I encourage others to embrace it, like they embrace the choice to do these other hard things that sometimes don't feel natural. In that space of gratitude, in that space of joy, amidst unkindness, injustice, to have empathy when we see such disconnect in the world. That is something that fascinates me, because that's not who we are. We were designed to be connected to one another. And so why are we becoming so increasingly disconnected? Why are we becoming so increasingly tribal that we're having to protect and defend our manufactured ideologies to justify our being, regardless whether we are in the world? And so rather than wag my finger and say, hey, you guys are all wrong, I'm like, I wanted to be the change I wanted to see in the world. And so that's been what I've wanted to do, is just kind of be that reflection or that ambassador for this ideology, but not let anyone know that that's what I'm actually doing.
We'll keep it just between the two of us. It's just between the three of us, not people.
There we go.
The event I saw you painted a phenomenal portrait. You essentially dropped the paintbrush, looked out at the audience, and the question you asked was, how many of you are artists? And like 4 hands went up. And there were a lot of people there. It wasn't like 6 people and 75% put their hands up. There were a lot of folks, and 4 hands went up. And then your point was, when you were younger, and if I were to ask you that question in kindergarten, in 1st grade, how many of you would have raised your hands? And of course, every hand pops up. Why does every hand go up when we are children? And I'm going to follow it immediately with, why do 4 hands go up when we are adults?
Great question. And the reason is it would be our voice of judgment. So around the age of 4, 5, 6, the time that we go to school, the time that we interact with others, our art becomes open to public opinion. Prior to that, it was just surrounded by our parents supporting us. Oh, we love your drawing. You love imagination. You just keep going. And then you begin to create something at school in a public environment, and you're again affirmed or unconfirmed for how realistic, how photorealistic was this drawing. Those children that were able to kind of capture photorealism at an early age just organically were told they were artists. Those who couldn't put down their pencil and went to math or history or something more concrete that they could be affirmed for. And so it really happened very early on. Our educational system is set up to reward reading, writing, and arithmetic. And then once you're done with that, we can consider a budget for the arts or for athletics. But school was meant for becoming more analytical and less creative, less whole-minded, less of I think, a whole thinker. It made us less open to mastering complexity. It made us less open to navigating ambiguity. It made us less open we wanted Scantron tests. We wanted 4 answers and we'll select one, not an open question. That's too much, it's too nebulous. A blank sheet of paper, we prefer the coloring book that had, so we know how to color it in. A blank sheet of paper becomes overwhelming and intimidating. And so that's where it started to shut down very early on. And that's why hands went up when you're children, because you can do anything. And I love creating, I love drawing, singing, painting, running, playing. But it systematically was kind of learned out of us through this system, and even by well-meaning parents, well-meaning school teachers, but that's all they know is this system of progressing forward in education, it is important. It's not at the expense of this, but it's in addition to, so not letting that part of our being fold. It's working them both together equally alongside each other through the process.
So you're preaching the kingdom of love, and you're encouraging people to answer the question yes and, not only when they are in kindergarten and completely open to life's limitless possibilities, but at age 36 and 49 and 72 and at each step along the way. How do we begin making that pivot back to the freedom that we had once when we were kids? It's still there, but how do we pull that back out of us?
That is that change of mindset, and you call it, I think, awakening from living an accidental life. And that's really what I'm doing, is we're kind of locked in on autopilot. We get up, we go to work, we come home, we go to bed 5 days a week, as my old friend John Alston used to say, and we get into this kind of autopilot drone version of what we could be. Our children do it through systems, and we need systems and structure, but that's not an almighty system. It's an enabler to allow us to be more expansive, not a disabler where we're bound to lists and systems and schedules. And so I like to use both, but understand the relevance and the goodness of both. And so how do people do it? They have to shift their operating system, the way by which they view the world, from a viewpoint of scarcity into a viewpoint of abundance. That we have enough. We are enough. We have the opportunity to give unconditional love and service to others without losing any value ourselves. That system's not taught. And so I feel like, how can I create a message around making that more exciting, where we want to live in a world of abundance? I think everyone does desire to live in a world of abundance, but we're trained to live in a world of scarcity, where we need to accomplish more to get more. And I think there's some value to understanding that, but we cannot understand grace, we cannot understand unconditional love until we let go of that ideology of scarcity, and that we've got to earn our value as a human being through what we perform on paper, what our net worth is, what college our children are going to, what kind of car I drive. So it's turning that value back into abundance as opposed to scarcity. And that's really where creativity starts, is this point of that shift into giving. That is love to me. That is creativity. That is gratitude. That is art. That's the metaphor for how our spiritual selves manifests itself in physical beings, is through art, through that connectivity. And so there's a whole mind-body-spirit connection that has drawn me toward. That's not just art for creating a painting that someone's going to hang on their wall and look at periodically. It's about creating messaging and an experience that art is kind of just a cool hook or a memory for, or gives traction to what they've heard.
So right now, Eric, there are executives and HR directors, there are nurses, there are retirees staring into their podcast receiver wondering, how in the world do I begin making this shift? I'm not in first grade anymore, Eric. I've got a busy life. I've got responsibilities. I've got lanes that I've got to stay clearly in right now in my life. speak to them just for a moment on how they can begin pivoting, not losing this aspect of their life, but gaining and expanding and becoming an even better version of themselves.
And it's not, again, either or. It's not, you might want to look at your life and what you value, a good SWOT analysis on your personal brand. Maybe you want to look at your legacy. Are you understanding that? Are you living what you've referred to as the life of success or a life of significance? And I think as we age, we have to go through certain processes and hardships and suffering in our life to understand what's truly most important to us. And a certain element of order, which we're all raised, or most of us are raised within. Those who aren't raised with a system of order have it even more difficult. Those who've been marginalized or don't have the basic necessities or needs of life are kind of born into disorder. But I think we need to start with a system of order and then experience some sort of disorder, some sort of event, some sort of hardship, some sort of suffering, some sort of unexpected event in our lives. One of your earlier podcasts talk about a bend in life that changes the trajectory of what the future is going to look like. And again, we define these moments. Some of us call them very bad, tragic, horrible. Some of us define them as epiphanies, moments to step into a life awakened. And so it usually doesn't happen until after someone experiences an event in their life that they no longer have control over. Usually something financially, relationally, or health. Is we experience some sort of rocking of our core foundation that makes us realize that they long for something more. So your listeners right now, they have it all figured out and are succeeding in all of their areas. There's no longing for something more, something greater. That's cool. You may need this later on. You might be going into an event later on, so don't tune out entirely.
Let me just clarify. You will need this later on. Erik's lying to you if he says you might have a tragedy in your future.
I was trying to soften the blow.
I have some bad news. We're all mortal. None of us walk out of this thing fully alive.
Yeah.
So
and some of us are going through it right now, and right now is a really difficult time, and it might be that moment that they want to return to a more human, whole, loving, empathetic, creative version of themselves. That's the first step, and none of this happens without that realization, because the lens of creativity doesn't go on until we choose for them to go on and for us to see the world around us a little bit differently. So the first step is understanding the value of why. Why is creativity, love, giving, all of those are an act of creation. Why are they important? And then once you understand how connected they are, art no longer is, can I draw really good?
Yes.
Can I take a good photograph? Do I look good when I dance with my spouse? It's this exploration of getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. Can I get out and dance with my wife and let go of my ego and those who are looking at me and judging me, and can I just enjoy her goodness and my ability to move to the music and be inspired by this moment and not let the critics or my own internal voice of judgment stop me from the pure enjoyment of this movement with someone that I love.
I love it. So that's something we adults can advance toward. Talk to us who have kids. I know you have 3 boys. We have 3, my wife and I, and we have a little girl. What I've noticed is, I love art, Erik. I believe I'm an artist. I really do. I love creating. I love painting. I love drawing. My boy Jack, who is 12, draws with me the least. Then it's Patrick, who is 10. Henry, a little bit, draws with me. Now he's 8. Grace she's on my lap almost every night, and we're creating artwork together. I'm concerned if I don't begin parenting and leading and encouraging differently, I'm going to lose all 4 of my artists. And they're going to put their pens down for good at one point or another. How do I, and then how do our listeners, many of our listeners have kids themselves or grandchildren, how do we encourage the next generation to hold tight and hold fast to that paintbrush?
And first thing would be, to understand the importance of why we're talking about this. And that is that if art is the channel, that again, art is not about producing a product. It's not about what your sons or daughter produce or the quality of the content they produce. or creating a finished product. It's about creating thinking. So when your sons doodle or draw, or you draw with them, they're thinking expansively. They're problem solving that which isn't being measured or judged at school for grades. They're just thinking. And so much, how much do we value quietness? How much do we value rhythm? How much do we value the process of creating and thinking and connecting different ideas? And so for parents, what do I tell them is that we, artists, are commissioned to create. That is, we are under contractual obligation for many artists. I don't do this, but the artists who make money or who sell their artwork, they create a piece of artwork, and then the public or an art broker values that art and then gives them money for their art. And so what I, rather than money, is I encourage parents to commission their children to create. So if you paint me a picture of what you want to be when you grow up, I'll take you out for ice cream. If you write me a poem about how much your mother means to you, I'll take you to Chuck E. Cheese or eat whatever. Insert that was when my kids were young.
Still popular in our family.
So
don't judge.
And don't. I eat cleaner now. So those of you who wouldn't take your children to ice cream or Chuck E. Cheese, fair. Find other activities that like them, and maybe you would take them to a Cardinals game. Maybe you would take them to a concert. That they are attracted to, that you're taking one for the team, and you're taking them to see Disney on Ice or T-Swizzle or whoever it is that our children are fascinated with, that you will commission them to create, and create from a blank canvas, create from a blank space, put on a play for me with your friends. We're going to videotape this, we're going to put this up, have them write scripts, write character development, have a protagonist, have these different things that they're having to explore and connect their mind differently than they do in school. So that our parents should become commissioners of, or patrons for the arts by commissioning their children, not because the art's going to be great, because that makes them a greater depth of thinking, not just width, knowing more and more about a lot of different things, which school teaches us. It teaches us depth, how to go deep into concepts or ideas or frustrations or opportunities, things we love, things we don't love. Art becomes an expression or a metaphor for that which we're feeling, and it becomes an incredible spot as a parent to be able to dialogue with our children about, why did you choose that color for that flag, or for that fort, or for that princess's dress, or that dragon? Whatever it is, we can ask questions, and they always have reasons that tell us more about how they're feeling inside, not what they're thinking in their head. I am sad, I am happy. It gives us greater insight to who they are and who their spirit is as a young individual.
You're big into spontaneity. You write about it, you live it. Why does spontaneity matter to us?
Because that's where life happens. Life happens between the cracks, and we need to get better conditioned at experiencing uncertainty, whether that comes in the form of setbacks or even opportunity, that we don't get too nervous or butterflies when good things are about to happen, and that we don't become too laden or burdened when bad things happen. So when spontaneity is like a little mini lab by which to be able to practice living present in the now, spontaneously going to a movie, spontaneously staying home, spontaneously accepting a neighbor's invitation to come over for dinner, spontaneously breaking outside of a perceived schedule to give in to the goodness of an individual moment that wasn't scripted or wasn't on our calendar.
For those watching right now, I'm like high-fiving him over the microphone, says, right on. Another word that you use quite a bit in your writing and speaking, it's one of my favorites, surrender, which is the opposite, I think, of what most of us living out the 3 Ps, and I'm one of them frequently. What we believe is important, and yet you hold fast to it, or you let go of it, maybe I should say more appropriately. Talk about surrender and why you think that matters, not only as an artist, but as a leader in life.
It's an ongoing, it's not something we achieve. It's an ongoing process of surrender. I feel like that is what makes a, let's start with successful nucleus for relationship or for marriage, it's about surrendering into a greater identity or being of what marriage can be, not what it is currently, and either experiencing intimacy or friction in the moment. It's we're both surrendering into each other to become a better version of what we both have. That's why we get married. That's this concept of marriage, is experiencing hardship between ourselves, not so that we can give up and quit, but so that we can grow from it and move towards this greater identity of a beautiful marriage. And so that is surrendering to what I had idealized as what my wife was going to be or what I was going to experience as a husband. So surrendering in life to what my idea for what I thought financially I was going to be worth versus what I'm really worth, or whether that brings me joy or pain. Surrendering to those moments starts to build our muscles towards being able to surrender when life, as you said, will hit us later and will bend the trajectory of where we're going, to prepare ourselves in advance. Because that's what happened to me when I was 30, is I wasn't prepared. I was an alpha dog, I was very successful, but I hadn't been given any tools by which to deal with hardship. And so it blindsided me. And once my fort was taken away, once my structure was taken away, the foundation was taken away, I didn't know how to build again. And so that's why I had to relearn a lot of these things through the art of surrender, to be able to build a new foundation on a different perspective or worldview of abundance.
You were given the gift of a blank canvas at 30.
Yeah.
I mean, candidly, you lost everything except your health and your wife and the health of your babies, and that's a pretty powerful, strong place to begin rebuilding from. When you look at a blank canvas today, what's your process for creating something that has never in the history of the world been created before? And asking the question, I'm looking for your artistic process here, but realizing that each day when we get out of bed, give thanks for it, you have an opportunity as a listener to create something that's never been created before. So I think your answer, Erik Wahl, to this will impact not only how you design and how you create, but maybe on how the rest of us can look toward our future.
Sure. And it happened again in that changing of perspective, is all of a sudden when I opened up my myopic viewpoint of what success was supposed to be, how I defined it, and opened it up, all of a sudden everything that I took in a little bit differently. And I took it in, and I'm going to speak specifically to not just those initial moments. I took those in as an artist and explorer, but once I started to translate this message, everything that I saw, whether it was a keynote presentation, a live performance in the theater, a street musician out on the streets of San Francisco, a movie, a conversation with my wife, they would all become almost material for what I would want to share. Life became an experience where I just wanted to capture these ideas that were happening because I wanted to share them at a greater scale. And so I just would also take all of these connections from different places to be able to kind of aggregate them and then to translate them to these specific audiences, whoever they would be. But that was, it was opening up to see the goodness of art being everywhere, beauty being everywhere, the opportunities for relationship and love and empathy being everywhere. And they were hidden in plain sight. But I was too busy before, too focused, too successful to even be able to see them.
Well, where you left it is a perfect pivot to what you're trying to teach the rest of us to do. You not only create these incredible works, and we'll have links to your work on our show notes, you also occasionally surrender them to the community in something called an art drop. What is an art drop?
That's a bigger concept. So I don't sell any of my artwork. I never have. That was a personal choice by myself, and I'm in a very grateful position as an artist that I make enough to knock out the rent on my professional career of keynote speaking, that I don't need to charge money for my art, and so I've never commoditized it. But I've also always thought you can't really put a price on cool, and so if I create and destroy, so I create just for the sake of creating, and then throw it away, that was interesting. That this wasn't created forever, which is what I did with a lot of my art, or that I would, the finished art I will give oftentimes to auction for charity or some foundation. They'll raise good money for a great cause. but sometimes as I'm traveling, I hide a piece of artwork somewhere in the world, and then I will geocache it in an online treasure hunt. So people who know our brand, know my art, know our story, they kind of stay tuned periodically to some of the social media outlets that I post on, where I'll post a clue on where one of my hidden paintings randomly is, and they'll have to piece together these clues to find the art. That keeps me entertained on the road.
Me too. I love tracking you online.
Yeah.
For those who aren't following you currently, where can they learn more?
You know, theartofvision.com is my website.
Yes.
Whatever if you're on LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever,
There's everywhere.
whatever social media channel has not offended you, today go to that one.
Perfect. I think that's the honing pigeon. That's about all that's left. You can't put a price on cool. That's a great takeaway. Demarius is a little boy who was the recipient of one of your works in one of the art drops. It's I don't know if you remember the story. Do you remember the story? Let me fill in a couple blanks, and then you'll take it from there.
I've had a number of wonderful stories, but remind me about Demarius.
You might have been in D.C. It might have been a picture of Martin Luther King Jr.
I do remember
it might have been seated there at the footsteps of this incredible monument for hours, with people walking by, observing, thinking, "Oh, this is really special, part of the deal." And then this little guy named Demarius is just there observing it when a gust of wind, spontaneity, in other words, blows this thing over. He helps set it back up, and then in setting it back up, he sees the note on the back. Like, hey, finders, keepers, congratulations. Do you remember that experience?
I remember it very well. It was in Atlanta, Georgia. It was at the Martin Luther King Monument. And so this was an early art drop where I was hiding a piece of artwork there as an experiment. That if I put up a finished painting of Martin Luther King Jr. at the MLK Memorial, how would people react to it? Would they interact with it? Would they not touch it? And so I just left it there for hours and hours, seeing what people would do. And it wasn't until he was looking at it and the painting actually blew over, and he saw written on the back, finders, keepers. First person to find this piece of art gets to keep it. And he all of a sudden, like with his mom, he's like, do you think? And they sort of didn't understand it at first, and then they started to get excited. And then I actually came out at that point and said, congratulations. For 6 hours, people have been walking by this, taking pictures with it. You're the first person to kind of interact with it, and so this is yours. This is yours because you earned it. You explored further, and the wind helped him explore. But that was kind of the genesis. One of the early art drops was driven from behavioral science. How do people interact with street art, with art in general? And so it was drawn from an experiment and became more of a fun activity.
Well, brother, you have various skill sets of the artist, including writing. You've written several books. I've had the good fortune of reading several of them. I have two of them with me right now.
There they are.
And I am the author of a book called On Fire. One of the great joys for me was the final chapter for me in writing the book was not actually at the end of the book, it's at the very beginning of the book. It's something we artists who write called the dedication. So I'm going to have you read from Unthink your dedication. And before you speak to it, I may have you read one more line from another book too. So go ahead and read the dedication in Unthink.
So this was 2013, and my wife Tasha and I had really, in many sense, I would say, co-written this book together. So I would write, and she would help me edit and hone. And then without her knowledge, I added to the book and sent to the publisher and told them to please keep this a secret until it actually releases, until the actual release date. So it wasn't until she received the first copy in the mail that she read the dedication, and it says, this is my dedication. They say that dedicating a book is one of the most exquisite acts of love that one can perform. Without hesitation, I dedicate this book to my artistic inspiration, my best friend, my unconditional lover, my wife of 18 years, Tasha. Come hell or high water, I will forever dance through the minefields and long to be tangled up in your arms. And this is actually the PG version of what I had written. It was basically a love note, an honest love note to my wife that I wanted the world to see. And my publisher got it, and they said, "This is incredible. Can we just tweak this or say this phrase a little bit differently?" And that was where I, as an artist, I'm like, but that's really what I wanted to say. I want us to feel that deeply, feel that intimacy. And they said, "We understand that, but for the consuming public, we need to change that just a little bit." So I still stand behind it. It's still beautiful and what I really meant. But it's no longer 18 years now, it's 23 years, and she still fulfills every single one of these pieces of who I am, what our message is, and how and why we want to share it with the world.
Well, and we're switching books right now. For you, those of you listening, you can't watch it. For those of you watching, you're loving it. Just last year, another book came out, and this time you have an opportunity to dedicate it, to maybe one of the children, parents, a great art teacher, former business owner, who knows, coach, John O'Leary. I think that sounds nice. Maybe your next book to John O'Leary, my friend and hero. But you made this one a dedication as well to a friend, and I'd like you to read this one too, Eric. And this is going somewhere, I hope. But read your dedication in the book.
Yeah. So I haven't read this in quite a while, so I'll hopefully not stumble through. But I will also say that I went through that very process of the first book was dedicated, and it was a very special dedication. That dedication meant more to me than the book itself because of the significance of it and how it was received by my wife as a surprise on the day the book launched. And so as I kind of came around, as I was looking for who to help me with this book, who'd been my inspiring, and there's a lengthy list, and those of you who are familiar with Richard Rohr know that he's been a great influencer of mine, a great friend of mine, and almost I would all say a spiritual director of my wife and I. So
well, that's a strong spiritual director.
It is, and I'm very grateful because I've been deeply impacted by his work, which really is drawing from all over the world, drawing from St. Francis and Rumi and Plato and Buddhists and Christians and Jews, and it's been an amazing place by which to take in new knowledge. And so there were ideas like that came up that would make a lot of sense. And so as I took to this book, I finished this book, it was time to write the dedication again, and I went through all these business leaders also that had been very helpful for me. Ended up writing the book, writing the dedication. This book, my love and my life are dedicated to my wife, Tasha. Without you, there is no me. You are the primary promoter and protector of my relationship with creativity. This book is a reflection of our work together, the spark that gives meaning and the grind that gives passion to the strength of our marriage and the success of our business. And again, that meant more to me than everything in the book, because that was what was personal to me and my gift to my wife, Tasha, who had helped me co-create this book. And so there really was not a more appropriate person to dedicate to than to double down on my wife and give her two. So that was ended up being an easy decision after quite a bit of reflection.
I think it's commonplace for many of us as we age to almost brag about the fact that we endure our relationships at home. Like, we're just kind of enduring life at home, and we talk about the ball and chain and the monotony or the misery of that life. You, my friend, are this example of a life that is not only on fire, but deeply, passionately still in love with a partner, a spouse, a co-creator. When you have an opportunity to describe your wife to a friend, who they haven't met her yet, they haven't yet met Tasha, what do you say?
I first say you're going to love her, because her personality is so kind, it is so generous, and it is infectious. And she's also very, very well read. And so she can speak to and meet others on their ground very quickly and become intertwined in their story. It's never about her or her story, and so she's a great representative for our team, for others to come in contact with and to get a clearer shot of what we're about, what our message is about, what she's about, what I'm about. And so I'm excited when people speak with her because they're getting a better sense. She really is, like me, an ambassador for this kingdom of love, and really supportive for those who also want to go into that journey.
So we're always trying to invite fascinating guests onto our podcast. Erik Wahl has been one of the names on top of the list for a long time. When we finally got through to your, in quotes, people, one of my, in quotes, people was talking to a woman named Tasha. And as we're figuring out dates, and will it work, will it not work, can he make it? It comes out during this conversation, oh yeah, by the way, Erik's my husband. Like, we had no idea during this long communication chain that you two were together. And one of the things that inspired my colleague that I have the good fortune, Abby, of listening, of working with every day, is how compassionate, how loving, how vibrant Tasha was in all the communications, whether by phone or through email. And I think that's an incredible representative to have for your organization. And then to learn that she's your bride and that you're best friends, and here she is outside of the studio, you know, still representing and still passionately in love with her spouse. For those of us who are in a relationship, and maybe we are high-five, it's a honeymoon type experience right now, because I think relationship and marriage, it's a little like weather. There are ups and downs. It's not speaking to climate. That's a longer-term issue going on, but weather's up and down. For those of us enduring seasons that are a little rougher right now, what might you say to reignite that marriage, that relationship, that love?
Right, that it's less about focusing on the other person or yourself directly, and it's about putting out this idea of why we got married in the first place. We got married because we wanted to lift each other up. We wanted to help the other person become the very best possible version of themselves that they could be. So again, we, at that time, when we knelt at the altar or were joined together, we surrendered to this idea of marriage, that we could become something better as two that couldn't be achieved as one. That's why we do this. And so then we enter into this relationship with excitement, with love, with lust, and it is exciting. It is really exciting. It's really awesome. And I don't want to take away from that because there's such beauty in that. That's what brings us together. But that also, like going to the gym, we look for resistance when we go to the gym. We don't want an easy workout. We want it to be difficult. We want to be pushed. We want to meet resistance. We want to be stressed. We want to experience sweat and hardship so that we can get stronger. So if we look at marriage kind of in that same context of going to the gym, it's not that we want hardship or friction between each other, but that is where you grow. That's where you get stronger, is when you experience something difficult, something where your expectations weren't met. Maybe you let your spouse down in some way, and you surrender that idea of I've been hurt, you've been hurt, into how do we make this a stronger marriage. So it's, again, amplifying the idea of a connected union and less my spouse is this or I'm not this. And so that's really where we as a couple are lifting up that idea of marriage, because we experience hardship. We experience those. We're not absolved from them. We experience them probably as much as everyone else. But it's how we act and react as a result of those kind of bumps in the road is how we define marriage. We also, this is actionable takeaway, kind of like the commissioning your kids, is we early on decided that we would never slam a door behind us, and we would never speak even questionably about our spouse in public. So we would never, words would never come out like the ball and chain, or this, or my wife needs this, or I need to be home. We took that language out, so the possibility was never there. We would always speak positively about our spouse because they're part of us. They're part of that connection of greater marriage, not weighing us down or holding me back, or they want union we should want union. That's why we got married. Marriage is a privilege that we need to go through hardship, some suffering, some darkness, some unmet expectations by which to be able to grow stronger and grow closer together.
So let me provide another actionable takeaway, I hope. Last year, one of the things I desired was to have the best marriage at the end of the year that I've ever had in my entire marriage. And so in thinking through and reflecting and praying over, so what can I do for Beth that would really set us up to achieve that, to really say I do loud and clear, louder than ever. So on January 1 of 2017, I wrote her a love letter in a journal, a nice leather-bound journal, and I tracked the things she did that day that were really awesome. And I did the same on January 2nd and January 3rd, and I never told her, not on January 4th or 5th or May 13th or May 14th. And on Christmas morning last year,
That is very
I had this little book wrapped up, and she opens it, and movie tickets fall out, artwork that our kids make fall out, trips to places we've gone together as a couple fall, all this. It's a junky book now full of chicken scratch. You know, God, those of you who know me, I don't even have fingers. So my handwriting's not all that perfect, but the artwork within it was. And I love nothing more today than walking by our bedroom with a child or so and hearing her laugh in her bedroom. I turn to the right and I look, and she's reading this journal. And it's the stuff that I saw her do that was worthy. And frequently in life, we see the stuff they do. They were late. They complained. They argued about this, whatever. And it's so minor. And you talk a lot about the big picture and the small picture and how we kind of get lost in the two.
I want to just stop you for a moment there for your listeners and say two things happened there. Number one was a choice. You made a decision starting January 1 that you had this goal of wanting a better relationship at the end of the year than now. So you had that awareness. And then secondly, you were disciplined. Is you had to find ways by writing them down. You had to look for them, go out of your way to look for them, to find where your wife had done something that was you wanted to note for later. And so that decision and that discipline created the action and the delight for your wife for now a lifetime to come. So for creativity, it comes from a decision and then action, from a strengthened relationship. Decision, then action. From whatever it is that becoming more grateful, it's decision and then action. The spark and the grind, the yin and the yang, they're intertwined. And so as your listeners are kind of connecting the dots here, connect them back to what John just said as decision and then action to create a greater painted picture, a greater goal of wanting your kids to be better, wanting your wife to feel more supported, wanting to become a more compassionate community leader. All of those things are decision and then action.
Beautiful. And thank you for summing that up. You ask your audience members frequently, and this is going to be my final question before we pivot to the Live Inspired 7. So start getting nervous right now, man, because it's coming.
I'll start loosening up.
Woo, all right. You ask them, why do you do what you do? Why do you work where you work? Why do you do the things you do throughout the course of the day? And you love hearing their answers back to you. So my question, Erik Wahl, painter, graffiti artist, writer, husband, lover, friend, creator, sojourner, believer. Why do you do what you do? You've been doing this now for almost 2 decades. 100 corporate gigs a year. It's exhausting. It is tiring, and it's gratifying. But why do you do the work that you do?
Because I believe in it. Because I have had the privilege of experiencing chapters of my life in such a deep and significant way for me that I wanted to make them available and share them with others, because I really hadn't seen it being done. I didn't have, I had mentors and leaders that gave me partial looks at what I thought this could be, but I just wanted to connect it for myself. I wanted to be a seeker, and both to be learning and then translating at the same time. And so this is a dynamic journey. What I talked about 15 years ago is not what I talk about now, is not what I would have talked about when I was a teenager, and it's not going to be what I talk about 15 years from now. It is living, breathing, actionable metaphor for what I think we all have the potential to step into living this awakened experience of life, that it is a decision to step into. And I just see there's beautiful, non-confrontational ways, non-tribal ways, non-territorial ways to step into that, but it takes some decisions and movement on our part by which to be able to do that.
Mm. Well, my friend, we have had the pleasure of having an awful lot of guests on our podcast, and all of them have been asked the following 7 questions that you are about to be asked. So this is a safe, well-traveled path, so get ready for it. Number 1, to Brother Erik Wahl, what is the best book that you've ever read?
Well, for me, it would be the most influential book, and that comes at specific times in our life. The most influential book on me was The Soul of Money that I read after I lost all my money at age 30. It's written by Lynn Twist. I don't think it was a blockbuster or national bestseller. It didn't top any charts, but it came to me at the right point, and it changed my relationship with what had been a dominant identity for me in the first half of my life. So it's called The Soul of Money.
Tomorrow, you discover that your wealthy uncle has shockingly died at age 103, okay, leaving you with millions. What would you do with that newfound wealth?
I have the privilege of, for whatever crazy reason, this career that I've taken on has kind of set up our future fort in such a way that I don't need to, I don't want a lot. I think that's been a lot of this is decreasing my wants and needs has been the most fiscal, conservative policy I can take on. And so I think my wife and I would collectively look for ways to use that to give to others and just find an exciting way to build traction for someone else's vision that we could help fuel with monetary resources.
If your house and studio caught fire and your wife, your 3 boys, and your 2 other boys are all out, all families out, all pets are out, and you have an opportunity to safely run back in and grab one item, what's that one item that you would come out of that burning house with?
One of my wife's 14 photo albums, because I know how much she would want those and how happy she would be seeing my face or seeing her face when I came out carrying what she would have gone in to get.
And you're really getting brownie points today. Like, it's kind of bothering me, but I'm just going to move on. I'm not going to be a victim to this right now. There are a lot of us that can elevate ourselves as spouses, so we appreciate the reminder from you, Erik Wahl. If you could sit on a bench on a gorgeous, perfect day, overlooking a beach, and have a long conversation with anybody, living or dead, who would you want to be sitting on that bench with?
With St. Francis of Assisi. I would want to learn from him because he came from a life of privilege and chose a life of connectedness. And so I would want to talk with him about that transition, that experience, and how he became St. Francis of Assisi that I honor so much.
Well, one of the words I think you would use would be the word surrender, and that's one that you use and one that you model. What's the best advice that St. Francis or anybody else has ever given you?
The best advice. Be present. And that's for each listener to take their own interpretation from that, but that's been my best advice that I've been given.
What would you tell your 20-year-old self?
Don't be so protective of your ego or so guarded around shaping of this identity that you have no idea what this future person is really supposed to be doing in their life. And so for you to think you know this at age 20 is a recipe for challenges.
Erik Wahl, philanthropist, entrepreneur, painter, leader, husband, father, friend. It has been said that all great people can have their lives summed up in one sentence. How would you like your one sentence to read?
Servant.
Erik Wahl, servant, it has been a pleasure to spend some time with you today on the Live Inspired podcast. what a treat it is to have followed your work for years, and now to have the honor to sit across from you, to meet you in your own home turf, in your own studio, and to share your message of creativity and vibrancy and life with our community.
Thanks for taking the time. Thanks for any and all listeners that have stayed tuned to the very end, having no idea who I am or what this message is about or never heard anything. I'm just grateful that you would listen all the way to the end, that you would take the time to come here to my backyard, San Diego. So just for me to close in gratitude to you, to your listeners, to this opportunity. So thank you to all of you.
Well, my friends, that was Erik Wahl. This is John O'Leary, and today is your day. Live inspired. Then you drop the paintbrush.
That's the wrap.
You shut the mic. You turn off the phones with 3% left of. Hey,